2022, 6:37 p.m. This is the Finance and Revenue Committee meeting with myself, Nick Allen, Bernie Flynn, and Brian McGinnis. So we are officially calling this meeting to order at 6:37. Item number 2 is comments, suggestions, petitions by residents in attendance regarding items not on the agenda. All righty, seeing none, I think we're good to move on to our discussion items, and we'll kick it off with 3A, which is the March 2022 financials.
Start at page 2, please. So looking at page 2, the cash balances for the month of March, we started the month with $14,556,196 in cash. We brought in $3,408,252 in receipts. We expended or transferred between funds $4,128,506, and this left us with an ending cash balance of $13,835,942. Of that $13 million, $8.3 million is restricted cash between the American Rescue Plan, bond funds, and the Capital Reserve Fund. Moving over to page 3, pages 3 through 6 are a breakdown of the interfund activity, the due tos and due froms, which are internal balances on the balance sheet of the monies that are owed between the funds. For the month ended March 31st, there is an internal balance of about $11.4 million. Moving over to page 7, the transfer reconciliation. For the month of March, we transferred $200,000, $100,000 from parking and $100,000 from the sewer fund. Both were budgeted transfers. We have only transferred the $1 million from the capital operating reserve, and that is planned to be paid back by June 1st.Moving over to page 8, our budget to actual summary by department. For the year ended March 31st, we had revenues of $6,954,355. This was offset by $6,198,718 in expense, and this resulted in a positive net income of $755,638 across the board. Moving over to page 9, an explanation and highlights of the variances for the year ended March 31st. Looking at the revenues, EIT, BP, business privilege tax, parking tickets, and stream protection are all meeting budget and are all within expectations at this point in time. We will be monitoring our sewer revenues. As you all know, we have a big project in the sewer fund, the tertiary project, which is well underway. That has a budget of $1.5 million. We just want to make sure that, the cash is coming in and that we're monitoring our cash flow so that we can make sure that we can make our expectations on these invoices. So we will probably back off on the transfer that is budgeted from the sewer fund to the general fund, just so we have the cash to make sure that everything is going along as needed. Looking at the expense side, police overtime is well within budget. But the public works and wastewater are trending slightly high at this point in time through March 31st. We would expect our line items to have about 75% left in each line item. That's kind of where the expectations would be. So any line items on these reports after that are below those benchmarks are kind of the items that we need to monitor and make sure that, spending limits are with where they need to be. And just a note, across the board in all funds, as we're seeing, what's going in the world today, fuel oil costs and fuel expense is trending very high. That is what I have. If you have any questions.
Yeah, I have just a couple. So just to confirm that June 1st date, we're on track.
Yes,
to pay
we
that
are.
back. Okay.
One other thing I wanted to note, and I didn't, we were able to make a quarterly pay down on our MMO. We were able to transfer $353,000, so that's a positive.
And then I know we're tracking that internal transfer balance.
Correct.
Throughout the entire calendar year.
Yes, and if you look back at pages 3 through 6, most of the activity was reconciled for the month, but we do have an $8,300 transfer that we need to make from the fire fund to the general fund, and we will take care of that in the month of April.
Awesome. That's great news. And then the little just kind of in the weeds question I had was about the snow removal. It's just because we got a lot of snow. Is that
Yeah, there was, we had a lot of snow and the invoices that came in were a little bit above what we had budgeted, but we do have some other line items that are not being, quite spent through the year at this point in time. So those line items are okay.
and is that related to Public Works overtime at all? The amount of snow we've had?
It's more just there was, different events. I think there was more snow events that there was a need for more, snow purchases. I mean, for the salt purchases.
Awesome. Great. Thank you. Any other council questions on financials? Any public comment or questions? Great. Thanks so much. So I think we're all set then to move on to 3B, which is capital expense reconciliation.
So as I stated last month, I put together the capital budget reconciliation showing all items that we have budgeted for in the 22 budget. If you look at this list, there's 35 items totaling a little over $6 million. What I want to focus on tonight are the items in bold above the line, which is about halfway in the middle of the page. As you can see, these 11 items were approved and allocated in the 2021 budget, but were not spent. Their funds were not spent at year end because the project wasn't finished or it was, a multiple year project. So what we're asking for, or what we're trying to make clear tonight, as we go throughout the year and we do our reporting, it will appear as though some of the capital line items are overspent when in actuality they aren't. There was sufficient year-end cash to pay for these items, but we did not allocate a cash reserve line item in the 22 budget. Jeff, if you scroll down just a little bit, please. A little bit further, please, to the next page. If you look here, I have included a summary of, our year-end cash balances as of 12/31. We had over $3.4 million. These line items that there was not a cash reserve line item in the 22 budget, total about $1.3 million. So as you can see, there's sufficient cash to cover these items. While it may appear that they're over budget, there was enough money to pay for these things, and they will be included in the 22 budget. So I wanted to make that clear for financial reporting that they're not being overspent.
Great. I appreciate that. So just to try to summarize it, in a sentence or two, these are all projects that are taking more than a year to complete. They were budgeted for last year, and we're just taking that money that we still have from last year just to complete the job this year.
Yes.
Perfect. Awesome. I don't have any questions about that. Are there any council questions? Any public comments, questions, concerns?
May I just add
Yeah,
one more
please.
point of clarification? I think it's important to understand the other thing we're learning by looking at this is, and our goal for capital programming and project management execution is, we recognize there's going to be some projects that come along, they're going to span more than a year. Obviously, like if we were to build a new public works facility, for instance, it's going to take probably 6 to 9 months from start to finish, if we're lucky. But embedded in this conversation is, can we get done what's in our capital program in a year? And we're trying to clarify the financial obligations for everyone, because if you go back to that first sheet Barbara was talking about, if we finish everything that we had in process for 21 and finish everything we had planned to do in 22 and get all that done, you're going to look at those expense accounts and say, like, what happened? We spent all that extra money, and that's what we're trying to clarify. But we're also trying to learn as we process this, like, what is our bandwidth for doing capital projects, because I want to be able to have cleaner conversations with council about where we finished the prior year and what we're getting into next year. And some of that's going to be baked into this year's budgeting process as well. So we will identify those projects that, we're do a better job this fall of identifying the ones that are in process. So this reconciliation process doesn't have as big a number on it next year, or we don't need to do it at all.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that a lot. I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, imagine that. Any other? Okay. All righty. So I think we're good then. Item 3 is done. Discussing is done. We're ready for item number 4, action items, and we can move on to 4A, which is to talk about the responsible contractors ordinance.
So this is a carryover discussion topic from last month. The resolution put forward is a responsible contractors ordinance. And to summarize this, it's for work for public construction projects that are performed by responsible and qualified firms. Contractors must meet certain pre-established guidelines, and the contractors must participate in an apprenticeship program. This ordinance is for public works contracts over $250,000. And I think it is important to note what the term responsibility means. It's satisfactory records or past performance by the contractors, as well as adequate performance capability.
Great, thanks so much. Are there any council comments, questions?
Yeah,
Sure,
I
go ahead,
have a few
Councilman
things.
Flynn.
I objected to this last time because of some of the wording on number 11. And I want to reiterate what I mentioned about that, as well as making an addition to the proposed ordinance. The number 11 clearly is a roadblock for any Commonwealth approved and licensed contractor from doing large projects for the borough. 20% of the contractors in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania are union. What we will be doing is freezing out approximately 80% of the qualified contractors to do work in the borough. The only caveat that I would like to change is that when it comes to the apprentice program, in addition to that, I'd like to add equal experience or training, because you could have a ABC contractor that is qualified to do our job, but did not go through the Class A training program for apprentice, and it would disqualify them. So that's my objection to it. Thank you.
And, maybe to that end, a good question to have answered, and I'm sure you'll have a good answer to this, I'm sure, but, with the apprenticeship being required in the language, what kind of advantages does having that in this document bring to the borough?
For just having the apprenticeship language in the borough or in the ordinance, well, it gives us a couple of advantages within the borough, and the mayor has campaigned and talked about this, is that when you have apprenticeship programs, and whether they be union or non-union, you're getting the best of the best. You're getting, just as when we put out RFPs, this body put out RFPs and approved that for engineers, solicitors, and auditors, in which case all three of those different sectors have to have and meet certain requirements in order to be a solicitor, auditor, or an engineer. And so as a taxpayer, we need to ensure that when using public funds, that we are getting the most bang for our buck. And there's a prime example of this. It's what just recently happened with the Westchester Area School District, in which case you're a teacher. And they essentially fired a contractor due to the fact that they weren't doing the job. This would prohibit that from happening. It cost us $2.8 million $1 million in legal fees. And so that would prohibit that. Now, with respect to the, what Councilman Flynn said about unions and non-unions, as I did bring up, and I did send this to every single council person out there, the Department of Labor has the Pennsylvania Department of Labor, that is, has a list of apprenticeship programs in the state of Pennsylvania, of which only 23% are union. Only 23. So that would not prohibit anyone who has an apprenticeship program from bidding on this at all, so long as they meet that requirement. And again, our job here is to define the term responsible. West Goshen just did it. The county passed it, I believe, last year. And I believe that we should be able to pass that. Now, since that term union came up, and it's not even mentioned in here except for the court case, in which the court case, there is legality to that case, in which case it was decided by the Third Circuit Court of Appeals that this particular ordinance is valid, legal, and held up in court. So, there's going to be that scare tactic as well, but that's, totally been debunked. Now, when it comes to hiring, and let's say if they are union contractors that do get the bid, well, with those contractors, or should I say employees, you have the opportunity, more likelihood of hiring minorities, women, and veterans to doing these jobs. And I think that is a good thing. And I think that's something that we should encourage. I think it's a win for taxpayers, most importantly. And so that's why I am for it. I disagree with removing that language from item number 11.
There, anything else you'd like to
Just
say?
offer
Yeah,
rebuttal.
go right ahead.
If there's equal, there's always a half a glass and full. I am not against apprenticeship programs because I am a proud graduate of the Williamson Free School of Mechanical Trades. All right? Number one. Number two, the apprentice program is probably one of the finest training that you could possibly get, whether it's electrical from 654 or 98, or whether you're doing steam fitters, or you're doing pipe fitters or carpenters. I have no trouble with that because we're a union family and it's not an issue. But in the documents that you did give me, under case number 19-2168, document 73, page 4, it says that the criteria for Class A apprenticeship, as I checked at Harrisburg, a Class A apprenticeship, they told me, was actually a journeyman. Okay, so that's after you've graduated. Apprenticeship program matches those of an apprenticeship program sponsored by labor union organizations. As a result, virtually all union contractors participate in Class A apprenticeship programs through their unions. I have no problem with all that. But the fact is, I don't want to be able to box us out at the end of the day if we have a qualified contractor that gets disqualified because they didn't go through the Class A apprenticeship program. And to your point over at East Goshen, that contractor is notorious for having issues, okay? And having an apprentice program would not have prevented him from doing the type of work that he did over there. The apprenticeship program does not prevent the general contractor from doing a good or a bad job. What that does is it gives them qualified workers to come to the job and make sure that the job is done according to specifications. Because in the apprenticeship program, the apprentice, whether it's 3 years, 5 years, 6 years, whatever it is, they train during the day and go to school at night, or go to school during the day and train at night, whatever it is. They're journeymen when they come out and they're well qualified. My only exception to the situation is if we have a general contractor that has a performance bond and a bid bond and has many years of experience, we shouldn't have to disqualify them from bidding at the borough based on they didn't have a Class A apprenticeship program. That's my feeling. So that's why I was interested in putting in there, just adding to it, equal experience or training. Keep the apprentice program in there, whatever it is, for bidding on our jobs over $250,000. But don't disqualify them because if they have equal experience and training to meet the criteria of the Class A apprenticeship program, they should be able to bid on our work. That's my feeling. Thank
And
you.
yeah, thank you for that. And I think a question I'm a little interested to know the answer to with that is who's going to put in, who has the time and the expertise to determine if it is an equal program?
That's actually the valid question, and I don't think there could be essentially a determination to do that. As I mentioned, there are nearly 500 apprenticeship programs in the state of Pennsylvania. Only 20% are union. So, I mean, if you look at those percentages, I mean, you still have 80% of the construction industry that could bid. If you look at the comparison to union and non-union, to me, I think it is, essentially a moot point. And I think you did make eloquently in your statement the importance of having apprenticeship programs. And so that's why I'm not seeing why we would put that either or in there, and then we'd have to determine what that either or meant. Who's going to do that? That's going to be the ultimate question.
To your point, Mr. McGinnis, and Mr. Allen. As Mr. McGinnis just mentioned, you're shrinking the construction pool down to 23%, I think Mr. McGinnis mentioned, or 26%, whatever it is. You're shrinking down the construction pool that low. And the other 80% of the contractors in the state that are approved by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and licensed by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, because you have to be licensed by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, we're eliminating those people. And
That's actually not true. What I said was only 23% of the apprenticeship programs are union. So therefore, you would still have roughly, by my math, 77% that are non-union that are apprenticeship programs. Therefore, they would still be able to bid,
if they participated in an apprenticeship program.
which they are.
Yeah. The one agency that I was very happy to talk to, and they did not say one negative word about the unions or their apprenticeship program, because I would have corrected them on it, was ABC. And ABC was very much in favor of the apprentice program because of the training. They wish that more of the non-union contractors would actually use the apprenticeship program that they offer. But most of the time, the non-union people, they said just don't want to participate or spend the money doing it. So,
And I think the question we're probably after right now, and I apologize if this number has already been clarified, but I think we're looking for the percentage of PA certified contractors that do have an apprenticeship program.
I went through the list Mr. McGinnis gave me. It's pretty difficult. And then I checked with the Department of Labor out in Harrisburg, and they were not able to give me a qualitative number in that situation because not everybody reports. So
Gotcha.
I'm not objecting to this at all. I think it's a great thing for us because we know that we'll have qualified people on the job. I just don't want to eliminate people that just because they don't have didn't work in the apprentice program. That's all.
And I think, are there any other questions or concerns outside of that? What's already been discussed on council here? Because if not, I'd be interested if there's any public comment, any public questions. We could take those now. Yeah, sure. Coming up. Yeah, just your name would be
Mr.
great.
Sulpizio. Um, To your point where you're saying, I understand what you're saying, where you don't want to have an equal person, but that's equal. How do you know that they're equal if they haven't been or have any documentation showing that they went through some kind of training or apprenticeship to help grow this forward so that they have some uh, credentials? It's not like you would just take we'll go to extreme and use a doctor maybe, we want all doctors to get out there. We don't want to lose people. There's this training out there and, we don't want them to miss, but would you want that doctor operating you without all the proper credentials to do whatever that was to be done to you? The other thing is, Ed made a mention also that a lot of the non-union companies versus union, would not want to spend the money. Well, I don't know why you wouldn't, when you can have a guy who then, or a person who will be trained and then be more beneficial to you out in the field to grow into something instead of trying to train somebody with no experience or trying to give them some theory of what's going on. So and if they don't want to spend the money to do it, I kind of say shame on them for that, because that's one thing I always hear differences between union and non-union, although there's very good contractors of both out there. You hear this cost difference. Well, I think a union company usually is putting that money into their people and their training to get that. So that there goes some of that cost value that is always spoken about with that. And just getting projects as far as even people being on site there, the trained apprentice who then becomes a journeyman, you were saying that the contractor who does shoddy work, you would hope that in that training of the apprenticeship, whatever it would be, that A class that you're talking about, that at some point when they became a journeyman or saw that they would then have enough to say, this isn't the right way we're doing this. And, those people would not want to work for that outfit because they know then it falls back on you as a journeyman. It makes your reputation that way, whether you're, again, union or non-union, that's your reputation out there as a tradesperson. So that was my thought. So thank you for my time.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Sulpizio. To your point, the fact that let's look at the non-union qualified contractor. And I know many of them in my head because I've been in the construction business for 42 years. The reason why the ones that are established, they mainly hire journeymen, carpenters, and mainly the carpenters, because they pretty much run the job, and then they use, for lack of a better word, people in training, not an apprentice, people in training, but they have to have more journeymen on the job, so they can make money. I'm not against the apprentice program. Believe me, I've made a fortune. I've retired very wealthy. Did I say that? I've retired very wealthy being in the trades. But the fact is, just because you have an apprentice program, it doesn't mean that you're a good contractor.
Agreed. But that's where I was hoping, like, where you hope that they're taught that in their training to know the right thing from wrong. And when you're starting to get like, this is kind of out of our realm. I mean, I've been in that situation as a mechanic myself, where you've been told to do something, you're like, no, you're not going to, you stand your ground on that, or it is what it is, or you make it right. You know what I
Right.
mean? But, and at the end, again, you're looking at, we're talking public works here. We're talking about taxpayers and stuff and all the extra money that gets spent. And if there's mistakes or whatnot, that doesn't say that even qualified people don't make them an account, but I think it's a lot limited to that. And you're more aware of what's going on in the process and procedures of that particular job or
Yeah.
skill.
True. Just because I hate to go back to union, non-union.
Yeah,
Just because you're union, it doesn't mean that you don't make mistakes.
Exactly.
And the bench gets very hard if you make enough mistakes and you got to sit on it and you wonder why you're not making any money.
Right.
But the fact, in my my sole thing with this. I support Mr. McGinnis 3,000% in this thing. And I only want the best for the borough, the greater good. And the performance bond and the bid bond is mainly the safety net. Because if somebody does something wrong, you boot them off, you go against the bond, you bring in another contractor to finish the job. For some reason, it always is double because he has to fix the guy's mistakes.
Well, that's right. And
Yeah.
somebody else comes, and then not only that, just imagine you as that particular contractor going into somebody else's work and not really
Yep.
knowing what they've done, and then you're trying to be
Yeah.
still efficient, right? And
Yeah.
still make it within the number, but you don't know how it was all taken care of.
I lived it, so
Yeah.
I know. But like I said, I just wanted to make sure that we don't box her by putting this into an ordinance. It automatically is law. And if you don't have a Class A approved apprenticeship program, you're automatically disqualified. So that's the crux of this whole.
Right.
this-
Yeah, I'm
Sure.
just trying to understand that, again, just what's it take to get somebody to get to that apprenticeship and get to that point? I mean, even if you were to work towards that goal and have a time frame for that, because it's something that, again, if there are those flaws and issues that come up with the bond and thing, you say, well, I don't know all the legalities of all that, but I mean, you can have people come back, and he mentioned that there was a suit with that and all that. So what do those costs add up to having these other contractors follow a rule, at least they're all on the same page and you're getting that quality out of that, that's what I was,
The most hard word in the construction field is change order.
yes.
When you hear change order, it automatically triples. And whatever the dollar was, it automatically triples. So, I mean, I'm not against you.
Right.
I just don't want to box the borough into a position. That's why I put on there, equal experience, because you could have a building contractor that has 35, 40 years of experience with good track record, okay? That is not where the union training apprenticeships are. Just say Lancaster
Right.
or out in Mannheim or whatever, and they're automatically disqualified. That's the only reason.
But that's what I mean, you're saying the contractor, and I'm okay with the contractor having experience because they've been through it and been learning all that stuff, but it's the people that are below them that we don't know what they're getting. And that's where I think there's the comparisons and the difference of what you're saying. And that's where I'm just confused out a
Okay.
little bit, but thank you.
Thank you
That's
very
your
much.
time.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
appreciate that.
And finally, to your point, I think that's the difference, the Class A apprenticeship program in defining the quality work and defining responsible.
I think in the interest of time, just because I know our prior meeting is already 40 minutes
Well,
late
do we have
to
any, do we
start.
have any other public comments?
Yeah, I'd love to get more public comments. Yeah, come on up. I'm good. How are you?
borough for over 4 years. Well, not a contractor, but I've worked in trades. I'm an electrician. And I feel very adamant that I would love, because of the fact that I've been in the trades, to be able to see responsible contractors that can abide to this ordinance. There's a prime example. There's a scaffold built on Gay and High. And with the proper training, before you go on that scaffold, certain things have to be there. The toe boards, the kick plates, certain things for public safety. Now, the fact that I've had that 10 hours of OSHA training, I know that. So even if I didn't build it, I know that those are the things that need to be there. So as a borough resident, I feel adamant that the proper training is more than adamant. And you said you went to Williamson? Okay. I worked at Williamson. Well, I'm probably right there with you. But I worked at Williamson, and it was real great to see those young minds gravitating towards guys who had knowledge. How did you get where you were? What did you do? Could I have that same opportunity? And, as you said, as far as, certain things, as far as in certain elements of being in the trades, if I have the knowledge and I'm working for somebody who doesn't want to do it right, I know I can take my skills elsewhere. If I don't have that knowledge, then I have to take what you're giving me because I'm scared for my job. So with that said, I mean, I feel as though that's the kind of attitude. As a borough resident, I feel as though I want qualified people here. If we got to spend a little bit more or whatever we have to do to get the job done right, then so be it.
And I think I appreciate that a lot. And if I'm just trying to summarize this entire conversation we've had, I think, Mr. McGinnis, you've talked about defining what responsible means. I think the goal here is just to increase our probability of success in finding a quality contractor. And I think this does that. And of course, you're not ever going to have a 100% chance of perfection. I think we've all agreed on that. But what it looks like to me is the language we have here will definitely increase our likelihood of having good contractors doing good work, so we don't have to come in and and redo stuff. I mean, first thing I think about is redoing HVAC in here already.
And that's what, $35,000? And how warm is it in here right now?
Exactly. Yeah.
To your point, when we renovated the building, we did not touch the HVAC. It was not part of the
I
bid package.
appreciate that. So thank you. But I was not aware of that. But thank you for coming in. I really appreciate the insight. And
Thanks for being at Williamston.
No problem.
Amen.
and I'll take more public comment. Mayor DeBaptiste.
Mr. Scott? So I have a question for you. I've known Mr. Scott for a number of years, and he's always done quality work. And I trust his input on this question. And because my question to you, sir, would be, what would be the significant change in adding the addendum that Mr. Flynn is suggesting? He is suggesting, if we could.
Documentation is everything. Training as well. Don't think change that language. Same document.
So you went through a Class A apprentice training?
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess my question is, and maybe my question would be to you, Brian, about this one phrase, since it sounds like 98% of this whole document you're in agreement on. So what would intrinsically change this document if we add that phrase? I mean, it sounds like there's other apprentice programs out there. Are they equal to the Class A apprenticeship training program? I guess that's at the crux of the question.
Mayor DeBaptiste,
That's
yeah.
the crux of the question in my mind.
Yeah, what I was told at Harrisburg when I called them was that the Class A, apprenticeship program was considered, they consider that to be a journeyman. They consider that to be when you reach the Class A.
Yes. Actually, journey person.
Yeah,
It's a journey
you're
person.
journey person. Okay.
Because we have,
Yeah, I know. I think
Yes,
things have
person.
changed at 50.
yes.
Yeah. They.
And-
The only thing, all the document, as far as I'm concerned, is good. except where it gets to where it says no contractor bidding on work that doesn't participate in the apprentice program over $250,000 can't bid. Other than that, everything, the apprentice program's good. Everything's good. It's just when you get there, you're boxing people out.
So you're saying if feel you don't have an apprenticeship program, you should be able to,
If you have equal experience and training. That's my feeling of it.
oh, no problem with that, but how do you get documentation if that person does or doesn't?
Well, the general contractor's longevity, for bidding on the work, the contractor's longevity, as well as the performance bond and the bid bond that they're putting up. That's our security blanket. If something goes sideways, and like I mentioned to Mr. Sulpizio, every time you say the word change order, I've seen stacks of them like this when we're building hospitals, and you got to fight for every one of them. So it's, but that's the only caveat that in that
Right.
portion.
And I think we all understand each other and where we're all coming from here. And I really appreciate that we've had some folks come in.
And if I
help us
may
out.
here,
Yeah,
equal experience is not defined.
right.
That's not defined. What this document does is it defines what responsible is.
Yeah, and I appreciate
And it's
that.
been upheld with the law. I mean, again, I'll bring it back to the point when we're bidding on our professional services. Do we want to weaken that? I mean, imagine that. I mean, you have to be a lawyer to be a solicitor. You have to go through training. You got to be an engineer. You have to go through training. You know, I would hope that our auditors are going to be accountants. They have to go through training. So what's the difference?
Right. And I think, are there any other members that would like to come up for public comment?
Can I? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Scott.
Because, yeah, sure. If we could try to keep these down to like a minute, I just want to be really helpful for all of us that are here for the next meeting as well. I understand it's a meaty agenda.
Borough resident, lifetime borough resident, Birkenstock. I think it really comes down to just mitigating risk, right? And that's what that paragraph does there. And it is absolutely not a union or non-union thing. I think you're getting caught up in the Class A apprenticeship training program. That's a Pennsylvania requirement for an apprenticeship training. All apprenticeship programs in the state of Pennsylvania would be Class A to be validated through the state of Pennsylvania. So I don't think that's a union, non-union thing. And I really think that sentence there, or that paragraph there, is mitigating the risk of getting into financial problems. The last thing you ever want to do in construction is pool performance bond. As to your point, twice as much, right? So now we're spending taxpayers' money. So that even coming into that, that's what we have to go in with: responsibly spending taxpayers' money, mitigating the risk, and that's what that paragraph does.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I'll say, I know we're going to have a lot of time to talk about this next week as well. So personally, I'm happy to recommend this to full council as written.
Yes, same here.
Are you willing to recommend it to full council without? Okay, so we can call that a 2-1 recommendation then for next week. And we'll continue the same debate. So thank you so much for coming in and being part of the meeting. I do really appreciate it. It's nice to not be alone during a meeting like we so often are. So I think we're good then to move on to 4B, which is ARPA funding. Section 1 is Parks and Recreation State of Good Repair.
Keith Karowski, Director of Parks and Recreation. This ask and proposal, if, Jeff, you can actually put up the pictures first, just to give you a better idea. The last 3 years, 20, 21, and 22, Parks and Rec has fallen on some pretty difficult times financially. Obviously, that has to do with the pandemic. The parks that aren't supported by friends groups have especially been hit hard. Everhart, Hoops, Marshall Square, they have more backing. I want to get our parks back to where they need to be, so they're more of an asset and not a liability. We talk about the streets, we talk about the sidewalks. Our parks have been used more than they ever have been in my tenure with the borough. So I put together the proposal, Jeff. Thank you. There's 4 parks: Catholic, Brittany, Bayard, Rustin, Horace, and Veterans Memorial Park. Those are the 4 parks that have the playgrounds that are in most need of some love. Total cost estimated is just under $35K, and that's where we're asking to use the American Rescue Plans Act. It specifically, it says in the American Rescue Plans Act, for deferred maintenance due to financial constraints from the pandemic. It fits our agenda pretty clean. I will be coming back in May with another proposal for Hoops Park that was originally supposed to be funded in 2020. That fell by the wayside because of the pandemic. The overall cost for the projects, like I said, is just under $35K with $1,000 built in for contingency. This can be done by our Public Works Department. We don't have to get a third-party sub to take care of this. I've already had discussions with them. They're eager to take on the project. This is something we should be doing every 10 to 12 years, is taking up everything that's there, ripping out. Bernie, you know, you've done some work at the parks with some volunteers. We just haven't had the manpower or the money to do it recently, and that's my request.
Great. And one, interesting thing that I always think about with this is, as we go into budgeting this year, is, how sustainable is our budget for parks? And I know we've had a lower budget than what's been historically done.
Yes.
And what I worry about is that if we continue that, are we going to be having the same kind of requests in another 5 years? Because we're not properly.
I think we need to budget higher. Again,
Right.
recently, it's more than just the last 3 to 4 years too. It's Parks and Rec has taken some cuts where other things were needed. So yes, part of my process with the Recreation Commission is looking forward at capital projects moving forward. Also, our general maintenance, there's been some changes in how we handle the maintenance projects, general maintenance in-house. A lot of that fell under Public Works before. That's shifted over to the Parks and Rec Department. So I'll have to work out those processes moving forward into 23 and beyond. But as we move forward with the funds that have been allotted to us from the ARPA, I think it'd be beneficial to treat, our assets, like we do the rest of them, like we do the streets and the sidewalks.
Any questions?
No, I'm for it, and you and I had communication
Yes.
regarding
Bayard Rustin.
Bayard Rustin, McBratney Park as well.
Yes,
So I believe this is a good investment.
those are the top 2 on the list.
Mr. Flynn? Cool. We can call it 3-0. Okay. Awesome. Great. Thank you. And we can move on to item number 2 under section B, which is Public Works State of Good Repair.
I'd like to, for the committee, I'd like to table that for next month. That presentation is not ready.
Okay, sure. Excellent. And then we can move on to the March 2022 minutes, a little later than I was hoping, but I didn't have an issue. All righty, so we can call that 3-0 then. Is this for other business, item number 5? Is there any other business today? We're good? Are we good to adjourn? All right, we're good to adjourn. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't missing anything. Awesome.